should retailers think about macroeconomic conditions in the coming year? I'm speaking today with Heather Carroll. She is Chief Revenue Officer with Covariant. Hi, Heather.
Hi, how are you?
Good, and thank you very much for being with me. Just kind of sketch for me, would you please, what are the major trends or themes that you're seeing in the market today?
Yeah, as we talk to customers and retailers that are out there, one of the big things we hear a lot are concerns around the economy, the recessionary period. Are we going into it? How deep would it be? There are lots of ways that retailers are thinking about that, especially when it comes to how they're thinking about looking at their capital investments in the coming year to 18 months.
Okay, well, there's the point. That's what it all comes down to. What does this actually mean for capital spend in the coming year? So what's your perspective on that?
I think the perspective is that there's a lot of concern out there. Folks are really nervous, thinking this is new. What are we going to do? We've had all of these hits to the supply chain, and everyone's talking about supply chain resiliency. How can we continue that? And I would just encourage people to really think about this isn't exactly new. We've seen this before. And what I mean is, if you look over history, we can look back at prior post-pandemic trends to really inform us on how did companies successfully come out of these periods and what did they do that led them on a trajectory of growth. And I would say look back at maybe the Black Plague. During that period of time, there was a pandemic. That pandemic led to a period of crisis that led to absolute chaos that then led to innovation. And the Renaissance period came out of that. If we look back at the Spanish flu, what came after that was a period of crisis, massive chaos, and then out of that we saw the Roaring '20s.
Yeah, and interesting the difference between those two that you point out. In the first case, the space between the plague and the Renaissance, about 100 years with the invention of the printing press. Thankfully, the second example, it was only like a couple of years before the Roaring '20s came after the Spanish flu. I would hope, or people would hope, that the second thing is more likely, that we don't have to wait 100 years for things to get better.
Yeah,
right?
and that really leads to the rapid advancement in technology. Over time, it's just advanced faster and faster and faster. So that pace of innovation is very important. And so what folks need to really be thinking about and looking at is where can we make smart investments that really help us innovate? And this is super critical for retailers that are playing in this space right now. If you look at the companies back in 2000 that were in the Fortune 500, 52% of those companies don't exist anymore.
Wow.
Because if you do not innovate in times of crisis like what we're seeing, you don't take that chaos and take that into urgency that leads into some action that you can take. If you don't innovate, you get disrupted.
That's great. You need the historical perspective, because otherwise you're just out of fear, you're going to cut down on your spending. You're saying there's probably a recession coming this year. We need to cut back.
Right.
Now, I love what you're saying here in that it's quite the opposite. You need to understand that this is the time to be investing. That being the case, what kind of investments are necessary to create which I assume is the ultimate goal, and that is a resilient supply chain?
That's right. So you have to focus those investments, one, on things that are going to really deliver on your value proposition. Things like getting closer to your customer. Things like removing the disturbance that you have when you can't find labor in a building. Those types of innovations that help you automate and reduce your risks to your supply chain are the ones that you should be looking at.
Well, in the case of labor, we have no choice. If the people aren't there, you need to do something to replace them to augment them.
That's right.
And so I guess automation in the warehouse is a good start. This is a good place to be placing your bets, you think?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. So what's the message to the C-suite, though? I mean, they need to be convinced. It's probably a challenge. Down there on the warehouse floor, you're all too aware of what's going on and the need for investment, but you got to get those people up at the top to back you and give you that proper investment. You have any ideas as to how you can get that, propagate that message up the chain?
Yeah, absolutely. It's all about the ROI. So if you look at where you're spending your money and where you have risk, you have to put both of those components in. Let me give you an example. So labor, we know in a warehouse or distribution center is one of the biggest pain points, finding the labor. A couple of years ago, that was the big issue. This year, what we're hearing is it's not so much finding the labor, it's keeping it. The cost of turnover is in the millions of dollars to these companies.
Yeah.
And when you are looking at trying to exceed your customer expectation and cut those delivery times, you can't have this variability of who shows up to work that day. So by looking to ways to automate and reduce the dependence on something that could be very variable, you're able to ensure that you can meet that customer expectation.
Yeah.
And all of that leads to a better ROI.
But with automation comes the need for that labor to be different than was before.
True.
You need a higher level of training. You need people who are more skilled, and as a result, you don't want to lose those people.
Right.
So additional challenges there. How interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks so much for that great perspective, Heather. We can't just sit back and expect that historical trends will happen. We need to make them happen by channeling that investment into some real good ROI.
That's
I
right.
really appreciate that. I do want to take a moment, though, to ask you about Covariant. Where do you folks fit into this whole picture?
Sure. So Covariant is an AI-based robotics company. So we help our customers look at these areas across their facility to find the right places to do the automation with a robotic solution. One of the things that is a little bit different about Covariant is we're able to look across use cases. So we're more of a platform solution from the AI perspective, which allows you to have a vendor that can come in, know your SKU set, handle the variability by leveraging the power of the AI, so that as your SKUs change, as your different use cases change in the building, and that velocity that you get, we're able to handle that with the artificial intelligence as the backbone.
You can handle it like seasonally.
Yeah.
The peaks and the
Absolutely.
valleys of demand require different types of equipment and people all the time.
Right.
So you're there for that.
Yeah.
Great. Thanks very much, Heather. I really enjoyed speaking with you today.
The same here. Thank you.
Thanks. I've been speaking with Heather Carroll of Covariant. Thank you very much for watching.